Welcome to this February 2024 project update presentation for the Caregiver Supports Project. The Caregiver Supports Project aims to implement a continuum of placement resources that enable safe, stable, and supported placements for children and youth in foster care. The Caregiver Supports Project is part of DCYF's Thriving Families campaign. Thriving Families is made up of multiple projects and initiatives in the child welfare space that focus on prevention, supporting families and staff, and strengthening practice. The projects, including caregiver supports, are listed on the Thriving Families website, along with links to fact sheets about each project. Today's presentation focuses on Phase 2 of the Caregiver Supports Project and what to expect. There are two phases of the Caregiver Supports Project. Phase 1 was implemented on January 1st, 2024. In Phase 1, DCYF replaced the existing 4-level rate assessment system with a 7-level model that is based on the needs of children and youth in care. Licensed caregivers started receiving new foster care reimbursement rates associated with the 7-level model in February payments for services provided in January 2024. If you need help with payments, there are a number of resources available on the Caregiver Supports Project website in the Payments section. These resources will help you learn about invoicing, setting up direct deposit, and registering for the provider portal. DCYF is also hosting Zoom sessions where caregivers can ask questions or get one-on-one assistance with specific payment issues. The schedule for the remaining sessions is also available on the website under the Payment section. Phase 2 of the Caregiver Supports Project is the implementation of a new Caregiver Supports contract to provide placement supports to both licensed and unlicensed caregivers. Pre-authorized case aid hours will be part of the placement supports available for Caregiver Supports levels 3 through 7. The Caregiver Supports contracts will be awarded to contractors through a bidding process, and the contracts will be executed by catchment areas, with implementation starting in mid-2024 and all catchment area contracts executed statewide in 2026. The contracts will roll out according to an implementation plan that is based on capacity to provide services and allowed legislative project funding for the next few years. Today's presentation focuses on what to expect for Phase 2 of the Caregiver Supports Project. Placement supports under the Caregiver Supports contract will be available to all caregivers, licensed and unlicensed, including relative and kin caregivers. The supports generally fall into the areas of education advocacy, health and well-being coordination, finding local child care, culturally and developmentally appropriate care, transition to adulthood, developing specific strategies to address a child's support needs, and crisis supports. There are 7 levels of placement support provided by a contractor, aligned with the 7 levels of the Caregiver Supports model on the previous slide. DCYF will complete the Caregiver Support Level determination process for all children that come into care, so they will all have a Caregiver Support Level 1 through 7 based on their support needs. Tribes have the option of completing their own Caregiver Support Level determinations or having DCYF complete them for tribal jurisdiction children. Please watch the January 2024 project update presentation on the Caregiver Supports Project website at the bottom of the page in the previous communication section for details about the Caregiver Support Level determination process. Currently, only children in licensed homes have a Caregiver Support Level so that the appropriate foster care reimbursements can be made. As Phase 2 and placement supports roll out later this year through 2026, DCYF will implement a transition plan to ensure that all children in unlicensed as well as licensed homes have a Caregiver Support Level 1 through 7, which informs the level of service provided by the contractor. The support services are grouped into basic support services for levels 1 through 3 and enhanced support services for levels 4 through 7. Case aid hours for levels 3 through 7 are pre-authorized up to a certain amount. The legislature did not fund pre-authorized case aid hours for levels 1 and 2. Level 3 is pre-authorized for 9 hours, level 4 for 12 hours, level 5 for 15 hours, level 6 for 17 hours, and level 7 for 20 hours. Case aid hours in excess of these pre-authorized hours can still be approved by DCYF through an administrative approval request and review process. If a child is determined to have a caregiver support level of 1, 2, or 3, their caregiver will receive basic placement supports from the catchment area contractor when the contract goes live in their area. The basic support plan includes the following support to caregivers: assistance coordinating educational advocacy for school-age children, assistance coordinating health and dental services, assistance identifying and accessing childcare, parenting skills provided as requested, resources and skills training to support the caregiver in safely and supportively parenting the child and youth in their care, assistance in accessing or providing culturally relevant services to each child, assistance with transition to adulthood planning and independent living skills, and assistance with crisis support service that include 24/7 crisis phone support and coaching. If a child is determined to have a caregiver support level of 4, 5, 6, or 7, their caregiver will receive enhanced placement supports from the catchment area contractor when the contract goes live in their area. The enhanced support plan includes the following support to caregivers: all of the services provided through basic support level 1 through 3 and listed on the previous slide. Additional services assisting with crisis support services, including, but not limited to, 24/7 crisis planning that includes after-hours availability that includes phone coaching and assistance, and in-person coaching and assistance as needed, assisting the caregiver to locate and schedule appropriate respite care for each youth, assistance with creating and implementing support plans as necessary for youth and caregivers, and assistance with coordinating case aid supports as needed. Here's a map of the 14 caregiver support catchment areas with boundaries in red. On the left, you can see the counties that are assigned with each catchment area. Caregiver supports contracts will be awarded through a procurement process with contracts awarded based on designated geographic catchment areas. Each catchment area will have one contract awarded, and that provider is responsible for serving all families within the catchment area. Tribes will have the option of serving their own tribal jurisdiction children and youth and families. Separate outreach and communications about the Caregiver Supports Project will take place with tribal partners through the Office of Tribal Relations. Child placing agencies will also continue to serve the homes they certify for licensure. These homes will not be included in the catchment area population. The placement support services, basic and enhanced, that are provided by catchment area contractors are the same services that will be provided by CPAs to their licensed homes. The implementation of caregiver supports contracts will be a phased rollout, which is necessary to ensure providers have capacity to serve catchment areas and to align with the funding allocated by the legislature. The contracts will be phased in statewide by 2026. The caregiver supports contracts will roll out by the catchment areas shown on the previous slide. DCYF used the guiding principles on this slide to determine the order that contracts will roll out to catchment areas. The placement supports provided via the caregiver supports contract are intended to increase placement stability and allow kin caregivers access to supports they do not currently have today, so that is why these data points are included as guiding principles. Additionally, DCYF determined it would be important to consider the ability of providers to build up their capacity to provide supports in areas that rolled out sooner would be in a good position to do this to inform later implementations. Legislative funding for 2024 to 2026 is also a limitation that had to be considered. DCYF used data to identify catchment areas with the highest level of placement instability and the highest percentage of kinship caregivers. Each catchment area received a score 1 through 14 for each of these data points, and they were cross-referenced to create a rank order. The rank order was then adjusted to ensure that provider capacity was accounted for, or that service deserts did not roll out first. Finally, the rollout plan was reviewed to ensure that it would be feasible within the parameters of funding allowed by the legislature from 2024 through 2026. The result of the analysis was the catchment area rollout order that is listed on the right. Both catchment areas in King County, King North, and King South will roll out at the same time, although different providers may bid on and be awarded the contracts for the separate catchment areas. The same goes for the catchment areas in Pierce County, Pierce East, and Pierce West. Here is the estimated timeline for the rollout of the first 8 catchment areas. The contractors for these 8 catchment areas will be selected in a procurement or bidding process called a request for proposal that runs through March 2024. During this process, DCYF evaluates the ability of potential bidders to meet the contractual requirements of the Caregiver Supports contract and selects the bidder who the agency believes will best serve families in a catchment area. Many different perspectives are invited to participate in the selection process, including caregiver representatives. There will be a second procurement process or request for proposal for the remaining 6 catchment areas that runs January through March 2025. The timeline for that rollout will be released at a later date. The rates for the Caregiver Supports contract are regionalized, meaning they differ based on geography. Regionalized rates better reflect the costs incurred by local providers. This table shows the rates paid in the 4 different zones identified by DCYF. Hourly case aid rates for each region are listed at the bottom of the table. Case aids are available for levels 3 through 7. The pre-authorized hours per month are listed in the table on the bottom left. Emergency support or on-call support is factored into these rates. To the right, you can see which catchment areas, counties, and tribes are in each zone. See the map on slide 7 for catchment area boundaries. To support accurate and data-driven rate setting, DCYF is using the regionalized wages as identified through the Employment Security Department, or ESD. ESD receives wage data from local employers with which they can identify current labor market trends based on workforce development areas. The request for proposal, or RFP, for the Caregiver Supports contracts for catchment areas 1 through 8 was posted on WEBS, the state's vendor or contractor registration system, on January 18th, 2024. This slide has some information for contractors about using WEBS. As mentioned earlier, a second RFP will be posted for the contracts for catchment areas 9 through 14. This is anticipated to happen in January of 2025. As mentioned in a previous slide, tribes have the option to have the catchment area provider award the contract serve their tribal jurisdiction families. A tribe could also submit a proposal to be the catchment area provider and serve all families in a given catchment area. Another option would be for tribes to serve just their tribal jurisdiction families. For this option, DCYF is partnering with tribes to develop a tribal-specific caregiver supports agreement. DCYF also plans to host roundtable discussions for Phase 2 of the Caregiver Supports Project. Please contact Mandy Moreland if you have any questions about caregiver supports for tribes, or if you would like to set up time with DCYF to learn more or discuss impacts to your tribes. The roundtable discussions for Phase 2 are scheduled for Tuesday, March 19th from 2 to 4 p.m. and Wednesday, March 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Thank you for viewing this presentation. If you have any questions or comments about the content, please email the Caregiver Supports Project Impacts at dcyf.caregiversupports@dcyf.wa.gov.